Hello and a very good afternoon to all News 9 viewers. I'm Neha Bhan. Let's take a look at some of the top stories on the international front. We begin with what's been happening at the COP28 summit. And in fact, at COP28 in Dubai, nearly 200 nations converge, each with its unique agenda. Take a look at the key players and their respective objectives.
Each country has its own agenda for the nearly 200 nations gathering at COP28 in Dubai. And finding consensus is a challenge, as UN climate negotiations need unanimous support to pass. Here are some of the climate summit's main players and what they're looking for. China, the world leader in both clean and dirty energy. It's responsible for 30% of annual global emissions, making it the world's biggest greenhouse gas emitter. But it also has more renewable energy capacity than anywhere else. China has been feeling the impacts of climate change through heat waves, floods, and extreme drought. Despite having the world's second largest economy after the US, it sees itself as a developing nation in climate talks and argues wealthy, developed nations like the US should move first and fastest in policy and finance. It's part of the bloc of basic countries alongside South Africa, Brazil, and India, who argue the same. The United States is the world's second largest emitter. It comes to COP28 a year into rolling out a $369 billion plus subsidy package for electric vehicles and other green products. Its Inflation Reduction Act is expected to triple the country's clean energy capacity by 2030. But U.S. delegates will face pressure at COP28 after Washington pledged no new climate cash to the United Nations this year. It supports a COP28 deal to phase out CO2-emitting fossil fuel use, despite being the world's biggest oil and gas producer. The 27-country European Union is among the most ambitious. The bloc, along with the US, is pushing to triple renewable capacity. It also aims to end new coal-fueled power plants, phase out fossil fuels, and power electricity grids with renewable sources in the 2030s. African countries are pushing for climate finance to speed up green energy projects. But not everyone's on the same page. Some, like Kenya, Ethiopia, and Senegal, have backed calls for phasing out fossil fuel production. Others, like Mozambique, want to develop their reserve of gas to capitalize off European gas demands. But they do agree that any deal on phasing out fossil fuels must allow poor nations to develop reserves in the short term to alleviate energy poverty.
Now, at the UN Climate Summit, a significant achievement as delegates agreed on establishing a fund to aid vulnerable nations in managing the expenses of climate-induced disasters. The agreement, a result of extensive negotiations preceding COP28's opening ceremony in Dubai, involves contributions totaling just over $300 million, including a substantial pledge of $100 million from the United Arab Emirates. Take a look.
Hearing no objections, it is so decided.
The UN Climate Summit clinched an early victory on Thursday, with delegates adopting a new fund to help vulnerable nations cope with the cost of climate-driven disasters. The deal was adopted following the COP28 opening ceremony in Dubai and already follows many months of negotiations. But some groups were cautious, noting there were still unresolved issues, including how the fund would be financed in the future. The United Arab Emirates will contribute $100 million to the pot, along with other countries contributing a total of just over $300 million. Germany pledged $100 million and the United States $17.5 million, with hopes the amount would build to a substantial sum. The early breakthrough on the damage fund, which poorer nations have demanded for years, could help grease the wheels for further compromises. Earlier in the day, COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber, who is also the CEO of the UAE's national oil company, opened the summit urging countries and fossil fuel companies to work together to meet global climate goals. Al-Jaber aimed to strike a conciliatory tone following months of criticism over his appointment as the head of COP28.
Let history reflect the fact that this is the presidency that made a bold choice to proactively engage with oil and gas companies. We had many hard discussions. Let me tell you, that wasn't easy. But today, many of these companies are committing to zero methane emissions by 2030 for the first time. And now, many national oil companies have adopted net zero 2050 targets for the first time. And I'm grateful that they have stepped up to join this game-changing journey. But I must say, it is not enough. And I know that they can do much more.
Over the next 2 weeks, governments will also debate whether to agree, for the first time, to phase out the use of CO2-emitting coal, oil and gas globally, the main source of emissions. Also on the agenda is what's known as the global stocktake. This is when countries assess their progress in meeting global climate goals. The main one being the Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming to well below 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 2 degrees Celsius.
By the end of 2023, global warming is projected to reach approximately 1.4 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, marking a significant deviation and setting a new record, states the World Meteorological Organization in its provisional State of the Global Climate report released on Thursday. The report underscores the urgency for world leaders grappling with the phase-out of fossil fuels at the UN Climate Summit COP28 in Dubai. While 2023 is poised to be the warmest year on record, it doesn't necessarily imply an immediate breach of the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold outlined in the 2015 Paris Agreement. However, the report serves as a foreboding glimpse into the potential consequences of surpassing 1.5 degrees with notable impacts, including record low Antarctic sea ice, significant glacier loss in Swiss glaciers and extensive wildfires in Canada. Now, the findings emphasize the critical need for sustained efforts to mitigate climate change. The report anticipates potential worsening in 2024 due to the peaking impacts of the El Nino climate pattern. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Dubai to attend the COP28 summit. Now, the first COP28 event, co-hosted by India and the UAE, focuses on the Green Credit Program initiated by the Ministry of Environment in October. Another side event, co-hosted by India and Sweden, will mark the launch of Lead IT 2.0, a leadership group for energy transition. This collaborative effort, initiated in 2019, aims to accelerate the industry transition to net zero emissions by fostering collaboration between the public and private sectors. The Prime Minister will also participate in a high-level event titled Transforming Climate Finance. The fight against malaria faces a significant threat due to the climate crisis. Mosquitoes, the disease carriers, are thriving in the warming, humid conditions. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom states that urgent, sustainable responses are crucial. The latest World Malaria Report reveals a worrying 5-fold increase in cases in Pakistan after severe flooding, providing a breeding ground for mosquitoes. The number of global malaria cases in 2022 is considerably higher than pre-COVID levels, with a rise in deaths to 608,000 last year. Pregnant women and children under 5 are most vulnerable. The report also emphasizes other threats, including insecticide resistance and an invasive mosquito species. WHO highlights the climate crisis as a major threat to the battle against malaria. Evidence indicates that extreme weather and rising temperatures have caused a surge in cases. Mosquitoes thriving in warm and humid conditions found ideal breeding grounds in standing water, contributing to a 5-fold increase in cases in flood-affected Pakistan. Previously malaria-free African highland areas are now vulnerable. Global malaria cases in 2022 remain significantly higher than pre-pandemic levels, with deaths rising from 5.76 lakh in 2019 to 6.08 lakh last year. Now, this is equivalent to nearly 12,000 lives lost weekly. WHO emphasizes the urgent need for sustainable and resilient malaria responses.
The World Malaria Report shows that progress towards key global targets for reducing malaria cases, incidence, and death rates is off track by a wide margin. Given current trends, continuing with the status quo will only lead us further off track. We highlight a number of key actions in the report that are needed to get back on track. First, we need to step up financing. In 2022 alone, there was a global malaria funding gap of $3.7 billion. Second, we need robust political will. Countries must translate their political commitment to universal health coverage into tangible actions and resources that will save lives.
Now, the fight against malaria faces a significant threat due to climate crisis. Mosquitoes, the disease carriers, are thriving in the warming, weather, in the warming, humid conditions. And now, as a result of climate change, mosquitoes carrying dengue fever are spreading. Scientists in Indonesia have found that infecting them with a naturally occurring bacteria prevents the transmission of the disease.
It's just a small plastic bucket, but it can make a big difference. In Yogyakarta, in central Java, residents are preparing to release tens of thousands of mosquitoes right next to their homes. Professor Adi Utarini has been involved in the fight against dengue fever for over a decade. She has specialized in fighting mosquitoes with mosquitoes.
We release both male and female mosquitoes with about the same proportion, so equal proportion, with the thinking that if we release male and female mosquitoes, then once they are in the natural habitat, they could mate with the mosquitoes in the population.
Researchers discovered that mosquitoes infected with Wolbachia, a widespread and harmless bacteria, can no longer transmit the dangerous dengue virus. Once introduced into a mosquito population, the bacteria-infected type gradually replaces the native species. The good news is that the bacteria not only blocks the dengue viruses from replicating in their host, but scientists believe the bacteria can be used to combat other mosquito-borne diseases, such as Zika and yellow fever.
One of these mosquitoes lays about 100 eggs, so from a box like this, the scientists can harvest up to 1,000 eggs, and they're ready to hatch from a few days to several months after being laid.
Yogyakarta used to be a constant hotspot for dengue outbreaks, and it is particularly children, like this little boy, who are at risk. But after 3 years, a controlled trial found that dengue cases in treated areas decreased by 77%. Now the trial will be expanded to include Yogyakarta's surrounding provinces. Winning the support of local residents has been key.
Initially, the community was full of questions. Why are mosquito larvae kept next to us? The result is that more mosquitoes now enter our houses. But the good news is that we can kill the ones that get in.
ada gunanya itu untuk
The release of Wolbachia mosquitoes in Yogyakarta began after 2 years of collaboration with communities and approval from the provincial government. There are millions of dengue cases in Indonesia every year. A little white bucket could help change that.
Let's now give you the latest from the Israel-Hamas war front, where truce between both the sides has expired.
The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Now, staying with big news from West Asia, fighting has resumed as the truce between Israel and Hamas expired, with neither sides announcing a deal to extend it. And now, before the truce was scheduled to end, Israel intercepted a rocket fired from Gaza. Affiliated media reported sounds of explosions and gunfire in the north of the Palestinian enclave. The Israeli military stated that further siren warnings of rocket attacks sounded again in Israeli areas near Gaza just minutes before the deadline. Heavy Israeli firing was reported across Gaza and Rafah near the border with Egypt. Israeli military has confirmed that its jets struck Hamas targets in northern Gaza in retaliation to rocket attacks. Now, right on your screens is the Israeli Defense Forces Twitter account, X, in fact, the platform X, where they wrote Hamas violated the operational pause. And in addition, they also fired towards the Israeli territory. The IDF has resumed combat against the Hamas terrorist organization in Gaza. 24th of November was the day, ladies and gentlemen, when both the sides decided that there will be a pause. And in fact, their Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu's office, has also tweeted. They have said, upon the resumption of fighting, we emphasize the government of Israel is committed to achieving the goals of the war, releasing the hostages, eliminating Hamas and ensuring that Gaza never again constitutes a threat to the residents of Israel. It was on the 7th of October when Hamas launched a deadly assault against southern Israel, killing about 1,400 people and taking about 224 people as hostages, Israelis as hostages. It was then and there Israel decided that it is going to retaliate, and retaliate in a manner that it ensures that Hamas is eradicated. And ever since, Israel has been continuing bombardment on the Gaza Strip. More than 14,800 people, including over 6,000 children, have lost their lives. But ladies and gentlemen, we continue to maintain that every country has the right to defend its territory. Now, earlier on Thursday, a total of 8 Israeli hostages were released by Hamas as part of the temporary ceasefire deal. Israel freed 30 Palestinian prisoners in the early hours of Friday under the truce deal in return. Since the truce agreement on the 24th of November, 110 hostages have been released, including 80 Israelis. The majority of the 30 non-Israeli hostages released were from Thailand, were freed under a separate agreement. Meanwhile, Israel has released 240 Palestinian prisoners in exchange. Qatar has played a crucial role in this particular truce that began on the 24th of November and came to an end today, with both the sides confirming that the truce will no longer stay. In fact, neither sides have announced a deal to extend it. Now, if we have to speak about how many people really have been released since the truce agreement on the 24th of November? 110 hostages have been released. This includes 80 Israelis. Now, family members of the hostages eagerly rushed to hospitals on Thursday to reunite with loved ones who had been held captive by Hamas for 53 days. Among the released hostages was 18-year-old Itay Regev, who joyfully reunited with his sister Mia. The hostages, numbering 16 in total, were handed over to the Israeli officials on the second day of an extended truce in the Gaza war. The Red Cross and other authorities confirmed the release, and negotiations have led to an extension of the truce. But in the latest that we have, the truce in fact has expired, as neither sides announced a deal to extend it. Now, in addition, the Israeli citizens, 2 Russians and 4 Thais, were released outside the agreement's framework. The total number of people seized by Hamas in the October 7 rampage into southern Israel was around 240. As part of a Qatari-mediated deal, 30 Palestinians, including 16 minors and 14 women, were released in exchange on Wednesday. Now, Israeli officials possessed Hamas's detailed plan for the 7th of October terrorist attack over a year in advance, known as the Jericho Wall document. The New York Times reviewed the document and listed out reasons that led to Israel's failure in recognizing the 7th of October attack. The 40-page blueprint outlined a devastating invasion, but it was dismissed as aspirational and too challenging for Hamas to execute. The plan's shocking precision, including rocket attacks, drones and gunmen entering Israel in various ways, unfolded as described. Hamas followed the document like a compass and executed the plan without any obstacle. The document raised questions about Hamas intelligence sources and potential leaks within the Israeli security establishment as well. On the 6th of July 2023, the Unit 8200 analyst alerted intelligence experts that Hamas commandos conducted training exercises simulating actions outlined in the Jericho Wall plan. The drill included shooting down Israeli aircraft, seizing a kibbutz, and taking control of a military training base, mirroring the planned attack. The analyst emphasized that Hamas was actively developing the capability to execute the Jericho Wall assault. Despite these warnings, a deeply ingrained belief that Hamas lacked the capability to attack led to a significant intelligence failure. The audacity of the plan made it easy to underestimate, resulting in one of Israel's worst miscalculations in its history. Now, survivors fleeing violence in Sudan's West Darfur recounted harrowing experiences of rape by armed fighters disguised in RSF military attire or the traditional robes and turbans worn by the Arab militiamen.
A 19-year-old abducted and raped by 4 men over 3 days. A 28-year-old women's rights activist seized from her doorstep and raped while being held for hours in an abandoned house. A 24-year-old raped by armed men in her home just a few feet from her mother.
They said, "We'll kill her if you don't give yourself to us." I sacrificed myself and said, "Whatever you want to do to me instead of killing my mother."
These are among 11 young women interviewed by Reuters who say they were sexually assaulted amid a war in Sudan by members of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces and allied Arab militiamen. They are all from the non-Arab Masalit ethnic group, which has been targeted in Sudan's West Darfur by the Arab-dominated RSF and its allies. At a refugee camp in neighbouring Chad, this 27-year-old medical assistant said she had been sheltering at a displacement camp in the West Darfur city El Geneina when men in RSF uniforms arrived and shot several Masalit men. They recognised her as the wife of a Masalit community activist and asked his whereabouts. She told them she didn't know.
One beat me while I was lying on the floor. They assaulted me and I kept screaming. While I was screaming, they stuffed a scarf in my mouth so I couldn't scream. After that, one held my arms. There were about 5 of them. Some were beating me. 3 were assaulting me. After the 3, I lost consciousness. I didn't know where I was, and I couldn't see or hear.
El Geneina was at the centre of a surge in ethnically targeted violence from late April, just after Sudan's conflict began, to mid-June. Survivors described civilians being slaughtered, picked off by snipers, mowed down by automatic weapons, and burned alive in their homes. In early November, the RSF and its allies waged another wave of attacks in the city. The women in this report were interviewed in the Chadian border town Adre in July and August. Reuters was unable to independently corroborate all the details of their accounts, but in many instances family members and friends confirmed elements of their stories. All 11 said the men who attacked them wore either RSF military uniforms or the robes and turbans commonly worn by Arab militiamen.
He threatened me with a weapon and told me, "Are you going to take off your clothes or not?"
This 25-year-old says she told her assailants she would rather die. Instead, they said, they would kill her brothers.
At that point, I surrendered.
Nearly all of the women interviewed said they were raped by multiple men, and all said it was at gunpoint. 6 said their attackers mentioned their Masalit identity, or used ethnic slurs for the Masalit and other darker-skinned non-Arabs. Emir Massa Asil, a tribal leader in El Geneina, has dismissed the rape allegations as empty lies. He leads one of the largest Arab tribes in West Darfur, a group from which many RSF leaders hail. Arab tribal traditions prohibit sexual assault and bar marrying Masalit. In a phone interview, Asil said if he couldn't bring himself to marry a Masalit woman, why would I take her by force? He also blamed the Masalit for starting the conflict. The RSF didn't respond to detailed questions for this report. It has said of the broader conflict in Sudan that it opposes any abuses against civilians. Speaking about the Darfur region, the paramilitary group's deputy head, Abdul Rahim Dagalo, said this in November.
The RSF will not provide support to perpetrators, but will respond swiftly and resolutely. We assure our firm readiness to collaborate with the Investigations Committee to present any individuals involved in violations to fair and just sentences.
The sexual assault reports come amid war in Sudan between the army and the RSF. More than 10,000 people have been killed and 6 million displaced. The United Nations has said that across Sudan it has received credible reports of conflict-linked sexual violence involving more than 100 victims. But at the camp on Chad's border, survivors are having to live with the physical and emotional scars of their ordeal. This woman says she was taken to a room and raped by 2 men. She tries to be patient, she says, and not show her emotions, so people won't look at her as a victim and judge her behind her back. But under the surface, she says, she is very depressed. Sometimes, she adds, I feel like my life has ended.
Now, Japan is concerned that the US military is continuing to utilize its V-22 Osprey aircraft despite Japan's request to ground them until their safety is confirmed after an accident this week. One person died and 7 went missing in the accident.
The fact that the US military continues to fly the V-22 Osprey aircraft, despite Japan's request to ground them until they're vetted to be safe, is raising concerns in Tokyo. Earlier this week, an Osprey fell into the sea near Japan's Yakushima Island. One person was found and confirmed dead, while the search continues for the 7 others on board. The cause of the crash is under investigation. Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Hirokatsu Matsuno on Friday aired Tokyo's concerns.
As I said before, in response to the crash, our government, including the Japanese Defense Minister and the Japanese Foreign Minister, has officially requested the US site to conduct flights of Ospreys deployed in Japan only after these flights are confirmed to be safe, except for search and rescue operations.
Japan had asked the US on Thursday to stop flying Ospreys, but Japan's Regional Defense Bureau counted at least 20 Osprey landings and takeoffs around US bases by Thursday afternoon. On the same day, the Pentagon said it was still flying Ospreys for now and wasn't aware of any official request for their grounding. But the Japan Self-Defense Forces, which also operates Ospreys, has at least suspended its own flights of the transport aircraft. Deployment of the hybrid aircraft, especially in Japan, has not been without controversy. Critics of the US military presence in Japan's Southwest Islands say it is prone to accidents. But as a close US ally, Japan hosts the biggest overseas concentration of US military power, including the only forward-deployed American carrier strike group.
Now, Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, has taken action to shut down 5 China-based influence campaigns on its platforms this year. These campaigns aim to exploit divisions within US politics as several significant elections approach worldwide, including the upcoming US presidential race. Meta anticipates the possibility of new campaigns aiming to manipulate genuine political discourse in order to stoke tensions in the countries they target. Meta has taken down 5 Chinese networks of fake accounts in 2023, the most of any country this year. That's a significant increase from 2019, when Meta first removed a campaign based in China. At an event in Austin, Texas, Tesla CEO Elon Musk unveiled the highly anticipated Cybertruck and handed over the initial batch of new electric pickups to customers. Take a look.
Finally, the future will look like the future.
On a darkened stage in Austin, Texas, Tesla CEO Elon Musk introduced the long-delayed Cybertruck and delivered the first new electric pickups to customers. The low-cost model starts at roughly $61,000, more than 50% higher than the price Musk had touted in 2019. He said the Cybertruck has a 6-foot-long, 4-foot-wide truck bed, 2,500 pounds in payload capacity, 11,000 pounds towing capacity, and a 17-inch ground clearance.
It's basically an incredibly useful truck. It's not just some grandstanding showpiece like me.
The event comes weeks after he tempered investor expectations, citing problems in ramping production of what he called a radical product. Cybertruck, Tesla's first new model in nearly 4 years, is critical to its reputation as a maker of innovative vehicles. At a time when the company is battling softening electric vehicle demand and rising competition, Cybertruck is also key for generating sales, though not to the extent of the company's high-volume Models 3 and Y. According to Tesla's website, the low-cost truck won't be available until 2025, while higher-priced models will debut next year. Experts say Cybertruck's new body material and unconventional futuristic styling add complexity and costs to production and threaten to alienate traditional pickup buyers who focus on utility. Tesla tried to display the usefulness of the new vehicle in a video it ran, showing the Cybertruck pulling a 40,000-pound sled farther than trucks from Ford and Rivian. It has drawn more than 1 million reservation holders who have put down $100 as deposits.
Now, Elon Musk refuses reconciliation with advertisers who left X over anti-Semitic content, bluntly bashing them. Disney chief singled out among those who pulled ads. Musk facing backlash shows no deterrence, stating X's fate rests with advertiser boycott.
Elon Musk isn't about to make up with advertisers. In a fiery interview Wednesday at a New York Times event, he cursed at firms who quit social network X over anti-Semitic content. He told such brands to go F themselves. And he appeared to single out Disney chief Bob Iger as one target. The company was among those to pull all ads on X after Musk posted in support of a user who repeated an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Speaking earlier at the same event, Iger said that association with X was not a positive one for us. Other firms, including Warner Bros. Discovery and Comcast, have also withdrawn marketing. On Wednesday, Musk bristled at suggestions that he was anti-Semitic, but did offer a note of contrition. He described his post as the worst he had made in a long history of foolish tweets. But one marketing consultant said his new tirade would be the closing chapter for brands doing business with X. Musk does not appear deterred. He says that if X fails because of an advertiser boycott, then so be it. Let the chips fall where they may, he said Wednesday. X is, however, suing the Media Matters organization, which has claimed that ads on the social network are appearing next to content promoting Nazism.
Now, Russia's Supreme Court has labelled LGBTQ activists as extremists, prompting fears among representatives of the gay and transgender community of potential arrests and legal actions. The court said that the international LGBT public movement and its subdivisions were extremists, imposing a ban on their activities within Russia.
Discrimination, violence, or exclusion or stigmatization of one sector of society is corrosive for all of society. What this means for the LGBT community is its further repression of their fundamental rights. We've already seen the banning of so-called gay propaganda in Russia, and now any advocacy in favor of the rights of people who have a certain sexual orientation has effectively been criminalized. It's also very unclear what is defined as international LGBT movement. So it also leaves the law open to abuse. It leaves it open to a lot of uncertainty for people on what could land them in jail and what is permissible. Not only the High Commissioner, but various UN human rights mechanisms have also interacted with the Russian authorities on this. Unfortunately, the situation is just going from bad to worse. And we are getting reports that this is severely affecting people's ability to access services, people's ability to be able to advocate. Now, this is not just about sexual orientation, as in what people do in their private lives in their bedroom. This is about the right to access health care. This is about the right to employment. It's about the right to many fundamental human rights that will now be scuppered because people will effectively have to go into hiding.
Now in Seoul, about 200 dog farmers protested near the presidential office, opposing a government plan to ban the centuries-old practice of breeding and consuming dogs. Amid clashes with outnumbering police and barricades preventing them from approaching the office, 3 protesters were detained. President Yoon Suk-yeol's ruling party has proposed a bill to outlaw dog breeding and sales for consumption, providing financial compensation for affected industry members over a 3-year phase-out period. Take a look. While the practice of eating dog meat has declined in popularity, the farmers and restaurant owners who serve the meat have been fighting to keep it legal. Now, 6 shirts won by Lionel Messi during Argentina's run at the 2020 World Cup are expected to become the most valuable collection of sports memorabilia. The collection includes the shirt he wore during the first half of the final in Qatar. Bidding for the white and sky blue shirts will be open through December 14, coinciding with a public exhibition to showcase the collection. Michael Jordan's jersey from the opening game of the 1998 NBA Final holds the record for the highest price paid for a game-worn sports memorabilia item, fetching $10.1 million last year.
We have 6 jerseys here that Messi wore during the 2022 FIFA World Cup, all the way from the group stages through the round of 16, the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and of course the match that everyone remembers, the finals against France, where 1.5 billion people were tuned into. These are all match-worn jerseys. He wore all of them during the first half of each match. And yes, if you look up close, there's definitely dirt on them. And they're the real thing, and they have provenance directly from him. Typically, sometimes the jerseys are washed, sometimes they're not. Oftentimes it happens in the locker room, and collectors know that. Smell is something that we definitely have to consider, but at the same time, the collectors typically don't care one way or another. For certain athletes, it can actually be something that you consider when you're purchasing the jersey. But in this case, they all smell fine. One thing that's interesting is the shirt that was worn against Australia was actually also his 1,000th appearance for club and country. And so it's just kind of a funny thing that it happens to be in this set, but a very cool thing to know.
Now, Paris is racing to make an iconic river swimmable for the 2024 Olympics, with construction underway on a massive underground basin. The Austerlitz Basin, which is equivalent to 20 Olympic pools, will manage pollution levels by collecting rainwater and preventing untreated sewage overflow. The goal is to host some Olympic events in the river, echoing the 1900 Paris Games. Despite challenges from a rainy summer, the city is determined to ensure water safety. The director for clean water at Paris Townhill linkens the project to a marathon, expressing optimism as they approach the final stretch. OpenAI's ChatGPT became the fastest growing software application in the world within 6 months of its debut. 1 year on, it has sparked the launch of rival chatbots, raised questions about the role of generative AI in society, and disrupted several industries.
OpenAI's viral chatbot ChatGPT launched on November 30th, 2022. In the past year, its uncannily human-like responses have taken the world by storm. While it has answered millions of user prompts, its growing influence has also sparked serious inquiries into, and movements against, the role of AI in society. It's a conversation that also played out in a tumultuous boardroom battle that saw the sudden ouster and return of CEO Sam Altman. Here's a look at the impact ChatGPT has had on the technology sector. ChatGPT became the fastest-growing software application in the world within 6 months of its debut, sparking the launch of rival chatbots and a bevy of startups. Its competitors include Bard, Anthropic's Claude, Character AI, and Microsoft's Copilot, which have seen a surge in users. But ChatGPT commands the lion's share of the market. ChatGPT's launch sparked massive investments from top tech players. Microsoft and Alphabet have invested billions to improve their cloud computing capabilities and take on more AI workloads as businesses embrace such tools. Chipmaker NVIDIA became the first and only chip company to join the $1 trillion valuation club. It's widely considered to be the biggest winner of the AI boom, due to its position as the key supplier of the chips used to power ChatGPT and other generative AI applications. With these applications running mostly on the cloud, vendors of cloud computing services like Microsoft, Amazon, and Alphabet have also seen their shares surge. OpenAI and its backer Microsoft have been slapped with several copyright lawsuits. Authors including John Grisham, George R.R. Martin, and Jonathan Franzen are suing over the alleged misuse of their work to train AI systems. The companies have denied the allegations.
From a fresh alert on the perils of artificial intelligence to Russia's ambition to compete with Western technology, take a look at these major stories of the week in the AI revolution.
From an extinction warning for humans to what Vladimir Putin thinks about artificial intelligence, this is Generation AI. OpenAI staff warned the company's board of a breakthrough in tech that could endanger humanity. That's according to Reuters sources. Details of the warning remain unknown, but it was reportedly a key development ahead of boss Sam Altman's brief ousting from the company. Vladimir Putin says the West can't be allowed a monopoly on AI. The Russian president says his country must massively scale up its supercomputing capacity and said a new national AI strategy would soon be agreed. But observers say Moscow is hindered by sanctions and an outflow of tech talent following the conflict in Ukraine. NVIDIA appears to have delayed the launch of new AI chips for China. They're supposed to get around US controls on the exports of the most cutting-edge silicon. But Reuters sources say the products are delayed, potentially creating an opportunity for Chinese rivals like Huawei. Amazon has unveiled its own chip aimed at cloud computing applications. It's designed to train AI systems and is said to be 4 times faster than an earlier version. The move steps up rivalry with Microsoft, which unveiled its own custom silicon just weeks ago. The US, UK, and more than a dozen other countries unveiled a plan to keep AI safe from rogue actors. Critics say the agreement isn't binding, and is full of general recommendations like keeping AI safe from abuse. But US regulators say it's important that so many nations have committed to putting safety first.
Now, scientists in the United States have created tiny biological robots called anthrobots from human tracheal cells. These microscopic multicellular bots, varying in size from the width of a human hair to the point of a sharpened pencil, were designed to self-assemble and have displayed a remarkable healing effect on other cells. The research published in Advanced Science describes how anthrobots move across surfaces and have been found to promote the growth of neurons in damaged areas of lab-grown neurons. The study builds on earlier research involving xenobots created from frog embryo cells and explores the potential of using patient-derived biobots as therapeutic tools for regeneration and disease treatment. Unlike xenobots, anthrobots can be constructed from adult human cells without genetic modification, offering a scalable and promising approach to producing swarms of these bots for therapeutic applications. Anthrobots navigate using cilia, tiny hairs on their surface mimicking mucosal skin cells from the trachea. These cilia, originally clearing airways in the body, now serve as a propulsion system for anthrobots, allowing them to move on their own.
Anthrobots are the first fully cellular, living biological robots made up of human cells. Similar to how a tiny planted seed autonomously develops and grows up to be a plant, each one of these biological robots, an anthrobot, also develops from a seed, a single human cell planted into an extracellular matrix, into this multicellular motile machine. But unlike any other machines that we know of, these robots, anthrobots, don't have any electrical wiring or mechanical parts. It's all living biological cells with an inherent ability to act as a machine. The fact that anthrobots are completely biological in this way makes them fully compatible with other biological tissues and organisms like ourselves, opening up the avenue for potentially deploying these machines in humans for healthcare purposes.
German court has ruled that the relocation of 60 billion euros leftover emergency funds from the COVID-19 pandemic to green projects and industry subsides is illegal. The government needs to take urgent action as the huge gaping hole in the budget could spell difficulties for 2024.
Winter came early this year, and while ordinary Germans grapple with the pitfalls, its government too faces a slippery slope. It all started here with a verdict from Germany's Constitutional Court a couple of weeks ago that called the country's finances into question. The government had moved leftover emergency funds from the COVID-19 pandemic to a fund to counter climate change. The court ruled that was illegal. Why? When Angela Merkel was in power, Germany introduced the so-called debt brake. It is enshrined in the constitution and limits how much government can borrow. It can only be suspended in emergencies, such as the pandemic. The verdict left a gaping hole worth 60 billion euros in the government's budget. Bad news for an already weakening economy.
Losing the 60 billion euros in the climate fund will result in an expected drop of around half a percentage point in growth next year. This will continue into 2025 and 2026.
It's also bad news for some of the government's biggest plans. The money had been allocated to semiconductor and battery factories, solar farms, and even trains. And half of it has already been spent. So the government needed to take emergency action.
So for 2023, the debt brake has now been suspended, which means the borrowing limit has been suspended and the government could borrow more.
It's not clear yet what will happen in 2024, but it could spell a hard winter ahead for the governing coalition.
Well, that's all we have in this edition of the Bulletin. Thank you very much for watching. You have a blessed day ahead. This is me, Neha, signing off, but do stay tuned to News 9 for further updates.
Hello everyone, Namaskar, I'm music composer Ricky Cage. 3-time Grammy Award winner and a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador.